Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. I would like to pray to the God of dislikes to entrust me with successfully game stopping the Filipino stock market. I talked about this already, and I am so pleased that I have my relationship with myself back again. I had taken a short departure away from it these last couple of years. And to understand why I took the departure away from my solosexual relationship, we got to go back in time. I was just re-emerging from the pandemic like everybody else. And it occurred to me how disadvantaged I was going it alone. We had just reopened from the pandemic. There was still a lot of trickiness, right? During the pandemic, most people's social skills went down the drain, and I still had to interact with people at my work. I was teaching as an adjunct professor, and I was looking at a job for a technology startup. I ended up going against that, but I was networking with people there, and people are tricky sometimes. And then I would see my colleagues have a spouse to go home to bounce ideas off of, or when we were dealing with budget cuts at the community college or at the technology institute that I was teaching at in Seattle, my colleagues, they negotiated from a different platform. They had spousal income to go home to, right? Or during the budget cuts when we all had to wear multiple hats, they had their dinner ready at home. They only had to think about their logistics of life half as much as I did. And that created a lot of drama, not only because I had to do those things, but I had to do those things in competition with people who didn't, right? That's a key figure a lot of people forget. If all of my colleagues were single and we were all in the same boat, maybe it might not be that big of a deal anymore, right? Because the market would be very different, right? A lot of people don't think of it that way. If I were living in Taiwan, where the marriage rate is a lot lower, right, and people marry a lot later in life, or better yet, in Japan, I think a lot of the differences would disappear. But I distinctly remember one meeting I was at. This was in 2023, budget cuts and all that. And I had one colleague who was also single. He was in his 60s. I actually I'll admit it here. I won't admit it to him, but I'll admit it here. I kind of befriended him with the idea that he might leave his estate to me because he doesn't have anybody else in his life, and I kind of befriended him with that in the back of my mind. I mean, that wasn't the only reason, but it was in the back of my mind that there's a small chance he might leave his estate to me. I've had friends who have gotten estates like that. So, but as we were negotiating with the dean and the rest of the department, it dawned on me the two of us had the weakest platforms to stand on. We needed that income. More importantly, we needed the social connection. We didn't have people to go home to, right? And that's when I decided I had to return to the dating scene. Now, what has happened these last few months that have re-energized my solosexual relationship? Well, the whole disadvantage of not having somebody to go home to digest things. Hey, we had this happen at work. What are your thoughts? That has kind of been automated. It's really beautiful. I mean, I no longer think about that disadvantage anymore. Now I have even better things to bounce ideas off of, right? And also, this past year, as you guys know, precious metals, strategic metals, and now emerging market stocks have done beyond my wildest dreams. Now I'm rotating into the Filipino stock market, and I like that a lot better than spousal income because spouses can fight. They can leave you. If your portfolio is well diversified, you don't have to run. You don't have to run into your spouse leaving you, right? And you certainly don't have to fight it. Although for some people like myself, I sometimes get over analytical. I guess that's the equivalent of a spousal fight for me, right? Anyway, what an appropriate timing. We're coming up to, I I went on my first date with myself back in June of 2010. We're coming up to a big anniversary, 500 million seconds since my relationship with myself began. This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.